we started going, wait a minute. So if that's Jeff's temperament, and yet we're in a highly happy marriage because we weren't always, what changed for us? What got us there? And we realized it was something that Jeff had done without realizing it would radically change the course of our marriage.
I confess, I'm a feeler. Have you ever heard that phrase, like, you can't control your feelings, you just feel your feelings? So in this episode, we get to be joined by Shaunti's husband, Jeff, as they talk about what highly happy couples do with their feelings that the rest of us probably aren't doing. Well, what a treat for this episode. We get to be rejoined again by your co-pilot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Jeff Feldhahn is back in with us. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeff.
Hey, happy to be with you, Brian.
Well, speaking of co-pilot, I had no idea when I read this book on the secrets of highly happy marriages that your wife had a fear of flying.
She did.
And it actually caused some significant marriage issues for you at one point in time.
It did, because, I would see her, with this, palpable fear as she's sitting next to me in the airplane. And I would think, you just really either need to suck it up or just take control over this particular emotion and fear and just get on with life.
How does the just suck it up message go for you in marriage when you tend to use that speech? Does that go well?
Yeah, I've been working on it for about 30 years, and it quite hasn't worked like I've wanted it to.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. I mean, you fly all over the place now.
Yeah.
And you're going around, you guys are speaking together. So have you gotten over it? Or is it still something that plagues you?
I have.
So tell us about that. When did it start, and how did you get over it?
So I don't actually know when it started. I sort of felt like I had always had this fear of flying, but it got worse, like worse and worse and worse, to the point where I would be so scared I would make myself sick. Like, I don't know if Jeff remembers this. He's probably tried to block it out of his mind, but there was literally a Christmas. We were going to be flying home to Jeff's family in Michigan from New York, where we were living at the time. And I was so scared that we're sitting at LaGuardia Airport, and I'm so sick that we have to cancel our flight and go home and spend Christmas Day alone.
Jeff, do you remember that moment, or did you really?
I remember that.
Yeah.
And perhaps it wasn't the most joy-filled Christmas.
No. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house there was weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Remember the whole thing about like setting aside the black cloud of doom and pulling yourself out of a funk? Mm-hmm. I was giving him many opportunities to practice that day. Let's just put it that way.
There was some funky tension, I would imagine, going on.
Yes.
So you're obviously over that now. What changed for you? Because I think that's going to lead into this whole secret that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's interesting. It started to not only affect, our personal life, but there were business meetings that I was going to have to go to. And I literally found myself saying to my boss, I don't know if I can go. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. And I was praying about it. And I really honestly felt like the Lord said, you have to start saying, when people say, are you afraid of flying? To say, actually, I'm getting over a fear of flying. Like literally say that different to yourself and to other people. And I'm thinking, power of positive thinking or whatever. I'm like, what is this? But I really felt like that's what God was pushing me to do. And so I started doing that. And I would I'd be in the airport. I could feel that tension, and I'd be going, nope, I'm getting over my fear of flying. This is not what God wants for me.
How long did it take?
It took several years.
Yeah. So it wasn't like, okay, now I'm positively thinking about this, and then bam, I'm done. I'm done in a week.
It was years of practice. But now it's like literally on the way here to record this podcast. Basically, the first half of the flight was the airplane going into gyrations because of the weather. And I was working the whole time and hardly noticed. I mean, I noticed it, but I wasn't really bothered by it, which is astounding that truly my feelings changed.
Yeah. And Jeff, wouldn't you say that's one of the big myths that you guys, as you've gone down and spoken to so many different people and couples on this topic, just that myth that is prevailing that my feelings are my feelings. I can't change my feelings about my spouse.
No, that's right. I mean, most folks take that position and they simply just think that there's nothing I can do about it. And I just it is what it is. I wish it was different, but it's not.
Yeah. And so what have you guys discovered about this? Because this is the secret, right? The secret is that you can actually learn to boss your feelings around rather than just feel your feelings. Like, oh, they're my feelings. I just feel them. But your guys are saying you've discovered, no, you can actually boss your feelings around.
We had a person that we were interviewing, a wife we had a study group as part of this research project where Jeff and I were talking to not just people who were the happiest couples, but within that group, there were people who had gone from being in a pretty desperate spot in their marriage. And now they were part of this highly happy group. I wanted to talk to them in particular. I'm like, what changed? And this one woman said, I realized for our whole marriage, I was letting my feelings boss me around. And I decided, no, I'm going to boss my feelings around.
And specifically about her husband.
About her husband. Mm-hmm. And so that was a great way of like capturing it. And so when we tested it statistically, we kept seeing it in these happy couples and we kept seeing examples of doing something that literally changed their train of thought.
Can't somebody just say, well, that's probably because the reason why you were testing, you were just testing people that naturally have a cup half full life, or, they're always either excited
Tigger.
Tigger, or they're just going to be, I'm going to will myself into a better place. Are you telling me that this is across the board, regardless of personality type?
Regardless.
You can boss your feelings around.
Regardless of temperament.
Do you have a story about like maybe where that happened or an example of how that worked out?
Well, actually, we do. And he's here on the phone with us.
Wow, that's Jeff.
Because, okay, can I just set this up? One of the things that we had been nervous about all the way through the research was this question of temperament, right? Like, especially because we had done a disc test, which is, one of those, again, instruments where you look at, what your measurements are. And one of the things that we had been told over and over and over by different people was, well, if somebody is a high C, they're just never, they're never satisfied with, they're never satisfied. And so, they would never call themselves a highly happy couple. They would never put themselves at the top of the heap. And so you're leaving out a whole temperament type. And I was nervous because obviously that would pretty much sabotage the project, right? And so I kept going, gosh, is that true? And we were asking about this. And then something happened because remember, we had discovered we were in this highly happy marriage where it hadn't always been that way. And suddenly we're like, wow, we really are in this highly happy marriage. And we did a disc test at a Christmas party with all of our team. And guess who is a high C?
Jeff? Jeff is a high C. Now, we're not going to go into breakdown what the D, I, S, and C mean, but C basically is somebody that
is, you could say they're never satisfied.
Never
right?
satisfied.
Like that's kind of, they can always, let's just put it politely.
I keep thinking of the Hamilton song that's singing in my ear that I'm just never satisfied.
Yes,
but he was never satisfied.
Go.
So
they always see what could be improved. Is that a good way to put it, Jeff?
I would say that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, or that gets consistently negative, never satisfied. I can agree with that, Jeff. I'm not a high C, but I act like that quite a bit.
And so this is what we started going, wait a minute. So if that's Jeff's temperament, and yet we're in a highly happy marriage, because we weren't always, what changed for us? What got us there? And we realized it was something that Jeff had done without realizing it would radically change the course of our marriage.
Okay, so Jeff, tell us what radically changed the course of your marriage for this high C to actually become a guy that is satisfied.
I wish there was a strategy or a plan that I had to do this and accomplish this task. But really what it came from was when Shaunti turned 39.
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I got into my head that, her 40th birthday, that's a pretty big milestone. She's the type of person that loves getting gifts. She loves thought and care put into that. So in my mind, I really needed to step it up to make sure that her 39th or 40th birthday was going to be something special.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I would write her a book, essentially, which would be a year in the life of Shaunti. And I would diligently record every single day of her 39th year and what transpired in our life, what transpired in her life, with our kids, between us, all of those things. And I would then, the day before her birthday,
right.
I would go and get it bound and compiled into a book and hand it to her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was.
I'm really glad that my 40th and Jen's 40th has passed now. But now I could imagine my wife going, if she were here, like, okay, well, my next big birthday, you're going to write a book for me, right? Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I can hear the men on the other end of this thinking, I hate this guy.
Yeah.
Well, let me just disabuse you and all of the men listening about my ability to give good gifts to my wife. So
this was a good gift. Let's just say this was an amazing gift.
Is this what he would naturally have done?
No.
No. Okay.
So for example, I can hopefully give you a little comfort in this, Brian. When Shaunti was pregnant with our daughter, our first child, she was pregnant over Christmas. For Christmas, I gave her a pregnancy workout video.
Man.
That's the type of gift giver I had been and have reverted to from time to time.
Yeah. Boy, what does that communicate?
Yeah. Anyway, let's not go there.
Go there. So what did you learn in this process, Jeff? Well, you write this book, and then what happens?
Yeah, so here's what happened. What I would do is I would make little notes throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, I would go down to my home office and sit in front of my computer and type it all out into, a Word document.
And I should say, I had no idea he was doing this.
Yeah, totally clueless.
He would often run down to his home office anyway. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. He'd be down there for 5 minutes,
right?
Sometimes 10 minutes. I didn't know that this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be very accurate of the particular day. And there were days when Shaunti and I weren't on, so to speak, the same page.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of emotions flying around. And I would get down to my home office in quite a mood, feeling pretty chapped about something. And I would just be sitting there hammering away at the keys and going, and then you said this and it made me feel this way. And because I wanted to capture a day in her life.
Yeah. So you weren't just capturing the great sunny days.
No, it wasn't the Instagram version of her year. So as I was doing this for a week or two, I got this thought that, maybe our kids will read this in 25 or 30 years and they'll go, Dad, dang, you were kind of a jerk at some of these moments. So I wanted to kind of be honest about what had transpired, but I also wanted to, in each entry, say something positive. And so I began to, before I would end any entry, I would say, we may have had, been at odds with each other today, but I just want you to know I am so grateful for you about this. And I would begin to put a list down. And the oddest thing happened. By the time I went upstairs from my office, all of that heat and emotion that I'd been feeling on the way down somehow left.
Wow.
And I didn't really recognize it. All I knew was that I felt better. I didn't connect the dots.
Yeah. So when did you connect those dots? I mean, that's a pretty big statement that you went down the stairs feeling one way about your wife. You came back up the stairs. The only thing that changed is that you wrote down a few words.
Yep.
So when did you connect the dots that that's exactly what I was doing? I was telling my feelings where to go.
When we were hearing other couples talk about their relationship in this research. And it was like, that's what it was, Shaunti. That's what we did.
And we had
to do it. I did.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that was astounding was this had been probably, I'm trying to back it up, but this had probably been 5 years.
At least
6, 7, maybe years.
You were 39, no.
Stop. So bad. So, but because it had been quite a few years back, it just hadn't occurred to me. And yet, when we started hearing these other couples, we both went, oh my gosh, this is what we're hearing. And that is what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was so powerful to realize that what he was basically doing was literally changing his mind.
Yeah.
He was literally changing the course of his thoughts, and it changed the course of his feelings.
And if I can jump in for a second.
Yeah.
I wasn't changing my thoughts with wishful thinking about Shaunti. I was remembering the truth about Shaunti, about the things that she does so well that I often just take for granted. We all have them. Every marriage has them. Every husband has those thoughts about his wife. Every wife has those thoughts about her husband. But we forget to look at them. We need to remind ourselves.
Well, and that's biblical thinking too. I mean, when you think about that, it's like you see the psalmist over and over again actually talking to his soul. You know, I think they wouldn't use the same word as thoughts, but soul was often used for like where your deepest thoughts are.
Yeah.
And why are you downcast, oh my soul? Why so disturbed within me? So he's not denying the fact that he went down the stairs feeling one way about himself, his life, God, whatever it might be. Then he says, "Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. My soul is downcast within me, therefore I will remember you." So exactly what you were just saying, I'm downcast. What do? I could just dwell on that, or I could remember where God has been faithful, where God has been great, where God has come through as he has in the past. You're saying do the same thing with your spouse.
Yeah, it's actually a purposeful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's something that a lot of people don't know matters, but it really matters. And so if you think how simple that was of what Jeff did, I mean, that really was just a very simple thing. And yet what came out of that, we eventually realized it wasn't just that, okay, he went downstairs feeling bad. He came back upstairs feeling a different way. That's how it started. But within a few weeks, he said one of the things that changed is while we're actually in the middle of our disagreement or our argument and he's feeling bad, he's thinking about what he's going to write later. And in the process of thinking about what he was going to write later, he was thinking, and what am I going to capture that's positive? And so while we're having the argument and he's upset, he starts going, it's okay. Like it literally changed how we interacted in the moment as well. And one of the things that we found statistically, once we actually ended up doing the actual survey and all of that, is that really, truly, what is happening in the happiest couples is they've learned essentially to talk themselves out of being mad. They've learned to change their feelings.
Quick interruption right now. I've always said that if you want to go fast in life, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I want to go the distance in my marriage. I'm sure you do as well. And so that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about The Art of Marriage. You know, The Art of Marriage has literally helped millions of couples around the world. And we've just reimagined it here at FamilyLife. It is a 6-part video series that can be used as a small group. It can be used as an event. You can take a couple couples and go to a weekend retreat, anything like that. And there is nothing better for your marriage than to get around with other couples and actually dive into God's word and discover the benefits of saying I do. And so with my audience, I want to make sure that you guys get the benefit of being a part of this audience. And so with the code word benefits, you can use that at artofmarriage.com. Just type in the word benefits. You're going to get 20% off. So go to artofmarriage.com, grab a copy, and watch God help your marriage go the distance. Now let's dive back into the conversation. Is this just willpower? Or is there things that you can actually do to become like this? Because, Jeff, you would say you weren't like that naturally. You hadn't been like that if it wasn't for this activity. Well, for those of us that aren't going to write a book anytime soon for our spouse, what can we do to enter into that process and start to refocus?
There's actually 2 things that really, really matter. And the first one is that you have to basically refocus your thoughts. Okay, so this is what Jeff was just talking about. There's a neuroscience principle that is so clear all the way through neurobiology, neuroscience. It's also all the way through scripture.
And just for those of us out there going okay, study of how we think.
Study of our brains, study of how our brains are wired. It's basically, how did God create us? Okay. And one of the principles in neuroscience is that what you focus on is what you will see. And that concept is, once you actually start realizing this, it changes everything, because so many of us, what we've been focusing on is the stuff that drives us nuts, right? It's the stuff that drives us absolutely crazy. And thankfully, there's always something else. There's always something else on the other side of that. And so that principle, let me just give you an example. Do you mind if I tell you an example of this? So there was an experiment that was done at Harvard, probably maybe 25 years ago. You can actually find it on YouTube. It's called the Invisible Gorilla Experiment. It's fascinating. And so you know it. And I would encourage people to go look it up.
You got to go check it out.
You got to check it out. It's very short, and you basically see a video of a number of students in sort of a small little lobby area passing basketballs back and forth. And the video asks you, and this was what the experiment was, count how many times the people in the white shirts pass the basketball. Okay. So it goes for, 30, 40 seconds. And then at the end, it comes up and says,
and Shaunti?
Yeah.
There were people in black shirts.
Yes. Black and white, like all over the map.
Multiple things happening.
Yeah. And it was a swirl, right? Like several basketballs.
They were moving around a lot.
Moving around. Exactly.
A lot of frenetic activity.
Exactly. And so you're looking at all this activity, like the activity in our day, in our marriage, in our life, right? But you're looking at this, all of the swirl of the stuff going on, and counting what you're supposed to count. And then at the end, the video comes up and says, how many times did the people in the white shirts pass the basketball? And I had counted 16. I think it was 17. And then it comes up and it says, did you see the gorilla? Did I see the gorilla? It turns out that a person in a full body gorilla suit walks into the middle of the swirl of the players, stands there, faces the camera, thumps its chest, and keeps walking off camera. And more than half of the people who watch this video completely missed it.
Wow.
Because what you focus on is what you'll see. And the issue for us is so often in the middle of the swirl of the day and everything going on in our marriage, there's all this good stuff that's going, hello, I'm here too, right? Like, look at me. And we aren't, because we're so focusing on sometimes, unfortunately, the negative stuff, the stuff that drives us crazy. And the great stuff, the stuff to appreciate, the stuff to be grateful for, that's there.
Right.
Bossing your feelings around is about refocusing on that stuff.
Well, and if you don't want to set up a whole gorilla experiment, I do know one that any couple could go out and do that's similar principle. You can take a quarter, go outside on a sunny day, close one eye, and if you put that quarter up, now don't look directly in the sun, but if you put that quarter up in front of the sun, that quarter will block out the sun. And it just goes to show you, I can focus on something so small and miss out on the bigness of the sun.
Wow.
If I'm just focusing on that. And that's what I do with Jen. That's what she does with me, is that we go through our day and we remember the one thing they did bad, or the thing that, the thing that irritated us, or the fact that they didn't clean up the kitchen the way we wanted them to clean it up, or they didn't pick up the kids when they were going to say they were going to pick them up, or whatever it might be. We focus on that, and we forget everything else.
And we forget this concept that we can actually change our feelings. So that's the first thing is that we have to do, of the two.
Refocus your thoughts.
Refocus your thoughts. If you think about it, this is basically Philippians 4:8 in action, right? Like, how do you rejoice when everything is crashing down around you? You think on whatever is lovely. Yeah. You think on whatever is excellent and pure and worthy of praise, rather than what's worthy of driving you crazy. Okay.
And Jeff, that's what you did when you were writing, right? I mean, you forced yourself. It wasn't like you didn't want to. If it wasn't for this book, you would not have forced yourself to do it.
I would not have. And it's just, just the grace of God that he trained me in something that I didn't know I was being trained in.
And it was one-sided, right? I wasn't doing this at all.
Yeah.
This was entirely what he did.
Yeah, and so that's interesting too, because we've talked about how a lot of these secrets that we're sharing, if one spouse starts them, it can actually change the trajectory of the whole marriage.
The whole marriage.
And so that did it for you, right, Jeff? I mean, you went from doing that for a book to then in heated arguments later, or did you apply it after the book? Like once the book was done, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or did it really change you after the book?
Oh, I'm sure that there was some reverting back to the mean, but really, it changed me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it changed me. I mean, that's the way that was so remarkable about it. It was, it just changed me.
Yeah.
This was why we ended up going, wait a minute, we're doing this research project and we are a highly happy couple. When did that happen? And realize, thinking back, that's when it changed.
Yeah. Okay. So refocus your thoughts. And then what's the next thing?
The next thing, the second one, is to change your actual actions.
Okay.
Change your actions. And this is basically write down the phrase, act as if. Okay. So fear of flying.
Yep.
So what changed is that I was acting as if I wasn't afraid of flying.
Yep.
I was going and doing things and saying, no, I'm getting over my fear of flying. And it starts to actually change you without you realizing it. Like little silly example, but if you, for example, say you don't really trust your husband to actually keep things from falling apart with the kids while you're away on a business trip. Okay. So act as if you do trust him. Okay. Without trying to super control everything.
Right.
Act as if you do trust him to keep everything together. And then you'll probably see that, oh, wow, okay, he's a capable adult. He can handle this.
It may not have been done the way you wanted to, and the kids may not have been bathed most of the time, but it's all right. They're all right. They're alive.
They're alive. They're having fun.
Lower the expectations.
Camp Dad, right? Like, it's not lower. It's just change, right? But you're acting as if, and your feelings are going to follow. You're doing something and you change. One of the best examples of this came from one of, we do ongoing research, and we were talking to a woman in Michigan a couple of years ago. And she was telling us about that her marriage had been pretty badly impacted by the fact that her husband's mom, so her mother-in-law, was a very, very difficult personality. And unfortunately, it had caused issues in their marriage, just very challenging. And she finally, there was one day where it was particularly bad, and she had continually felt like God told her, you have to love her. You have to love her. And this one bad day, she was like, forget it. Like, I can't love this woman. And she felt like God was like, I don't expect you to love her. You have to let me love her through you.
Yeah. Okay,
great. How do I do that? And she said, she felt the Lord ask her a question. What would you do if you loved her? Well, if I loved her, I would actually call her more often than just because I had to check and see if she could handle the grandkids. Or if I loved her, I would call her and ask for her cinnamon roll recipe, which she was really proud of. If I loved her, I would do this and that. And she felt like God said, great, go do those things.
Yeah. Wow.
And she said it was astounding. She was still the same challenging person, completely changed her feelings about it.
Well, I just think about how many times Jesus said that, right? When he said, love your enemies, it wasn't just about this contemplative thought of love. Like, oh, I'm going to love them with great thoughts. I'm going to send my thoughts their way. No, it was, if they want this, give them something more.
Give them your cloak.
Give them your cloak. If they're cold, give them your cloak. If they hit you on one side of the cheek, give them the other side of the cheek. It was always about one-upping from a thought to an action, a very deliberate. And it would be a sacrificial action. And that's often what these are, right, Jeff, is that when I'm actually changing my thoughts about my spouse and bossing my feelings around, I'm gonna intentionally do something that I wouldn't normally do. You happen to write down your feelings in those moments, or write down your thoughts in those moments about Shaunti, but it changed your feelings in the process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But what I can say is that it's really not a leap of faith to do this. There is enough research on this particular topic to show that if you do this, there is going to be a positive outcome, either in your spouse's response to it or just in the way you feel about your spouse. We all want peace and joy in our lives. So why not practice the things that increase the likelihood that you're going to have those?
Yeah.
And we can't, we can't get away from the unfortunate fact, that there are going to be some marriages where there are things that you shouldn't just set aside,
Sure.
right? Like you shouldn't just go, well, yes, they're abusive to me, but
Right.
look at all these good things.
Right. Or they were unfaithful, or they were, they're dealing with some addictions in their life, those kind of things.
Yes, those things exist. The issue is, and again, as we've said all the way through, the issue is, though, for the vast, vast majority of couples where there's just heartache sometimes, and sometimes more than sometimes, right? Where there just is that heartache. The reality in the vast majority of those cases is, yeah, but there's also great things too.
Yeah.
And so once you actually train your feelings so that you're bossing them around rather than letting them boss you around, it usually, not always, but usually has a pretty extraordinary marriage impact.
Yeah. So it starts with that first step that you said. We got to refocus your thoughts. You've got to actually focus on something different from that small thing that you're looking at. Then you actually follow through and go, what would I do?
Yes.
If I felt better about this person, if I love this person.
Act as if.
Bruce, our producer on this season of Married with Benefits, he gave me a great quote by Martin Lloyd-Jones, who was a great preacher back in the day. And he said this: have you realized that most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you are listening to yourself instead of talking to yourself? Take those thoughts, you could put feelings there. Take those thoughts or feelings that come to you in the moment you wake up. You have not originated them, but they start talking to you. They bring back the problem of yesterday, etc. Somebody is talking. Who is talking to you? Yourself is talking to you. And so he gets on, and he basically goes on to say that, listen, you have an option to either listen to yourself or talk to yourself.
That's so good.
And I love how somebody said at one time, it's going to be easier to act your way into a new kind of feeling than to feel your way into a new kind of acting.
Oof.
And so let's act on those thoughts that we go, well, if I was loving my spouse, this is what I do. And watch the feelings follow, is what you're saying.
Yep.
The feelings actually can follow. They don't just have to be and exist.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's good. So that's a great secret, another one of highly happy marriages, which is what I want. And I think that's what all of us long for. It's just, are we willing to say, you know what, Scripture talks about this, science backs it up. Maybe I should actually start listening to that rather than the feelings that I have in the moment, and just watch what happens.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please hit like or subscribe. And please leave a review or a comment. It just helps get the word out to more couples so that they could find hope for their own marriage. And listen, if you haven't picked up Shaunti's book that we're talking about all this season long, The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages, you're going to want to get that and maybe grab one to give away, because that's really what we're about here at Family Life. We want to help you experience oneness so that you can impact your corner of the world. And listen, we've got a lot more help and hope for your marriage and family at FamilyLife.com. You can find other articles, you can find podcasts, you can find shows, small group resources. You'll want to check that out at FamilyLife.com.